International trade has been increasing significantly ever since the Second World War, which was 60 years back. Of course, there have been certain times when it has come down, but the trend has always been on the upward side. Therefore, because international trade and international investment is so important to business strategy, and because in this session we are looking at framing business strategy, we are looking at strategic positioning, because of that we need to look at the competitive advantage of nations. That is, we need to see which is the nation where we are going to compete, where our firm is going to compete. See, we have seen what we are going to compete in, we have seen how we are going to compete, now we are looking at where we will compete. Now, let's look at the competitive advantage of nations, right? We again go back to Professor Michael Porter, who through the National Competitive Advantage model has helped us to analyze the competence of different nations when it comes to different kinds of industries. Professor Porter says that there are four forces in this case. There are four forces. There is the intensity of rivalry in a particular country. There are local demand conditions in a particular country, supporting industries in a particular country, and factor conditions in a particular country. These four factors together impact industries in that country, right? So, the National Competitive Advantage model, Professor Porter's National Competitive Advantage model, will really help us to answer questions like this. Now, why is it that the biotech or the computer software, computer hardware industries originated in the US and have largely grown in the US? Why is it that the consumer electronics industries grew very rapidly in Japan? Now, of course, it is in Korea that these consumer electronics industries are growing. On the other hand, chemical companies grew rapidly in Germany. Irrigation companies grew rapidly in Israel. Automobiles have grown rapidly in India, right? So, why is it that these different industries have grown in different countries? This is what the National Competitive Advantage model will help us to resolve. Why should companies be concerned with this in framing their strategy? Because they should know which nation, which country they should locate themselves in, A, and B, they should know where their competitors can come in from. We talked about four forces which will help a company to understand national competitive advantage. Force 1 is factor conditions. Force 2 is the intensity of rivalry among companies in that country. Force 3 is the nature of local demand in that country. And force 4 is the competitive supporting industries in that country. Let's look at each one of these forces. Take force 1, factor conditions. What does that mean? Conditions: land, labor, capital, knowledge. You must have the right mix of these for that particular industry to grow. Now, the computer software industry or the computer hardware industry grew in the US because probably sometime in the early 50s or 60s, the electronics faculty were very, very strong in the US universities, and therefore those universities were offering courses in these kinds of areas, in these kinds of disciplines, right? So that was the reason why this happened in the US. On the other hand, if you look at universities in Germany, right from 1900, they have been very strong in the chemical area. And because universities have been strong in the chemical area, chemical industries have grown up in Germany. So, factor conditions of land, labor, capital, knowledge is one major issue. The second one is rivalry. See, the point is that in a particular country, if companies fight with each other, then they fight to become better, right? And they are able to fight in the world. Companies in Japan. Japan is a country where right from the rebirth of Japan after the Second World War, it has followed a very open industrial policy, and competition within Japan is very severe. So, Japanese companies were able to compete, therefore, anywhere in the world. If you have a situation where companies do not need to compete, then you do not generate good companies. This is what happened in India till about 20 years back, before liberalization. Companies in India didn't need to compete. Therefore, our companies were substandard. It is only after liberalization that our companies have become world class. So, intensity of rivalry in a particular market forces companies to become better. The third issue is the nature of local demand, right? Now, if you have a big market in a particular country, if it's a very demanding market, if the customers expect the best, then the companies in that country will grow. The companies in that country will be able to compete anywhere in the world. So, the third aspect is the nature of local demand. And the fourth is the competitive supporting industries. No industry can survive on its own. Every industry needs raw materials, needs components, needs certain kinds of skilled labor. If these resources are available in a particular country, then that industry will grow in that country. So these are the four reasons why different countries are good for different kinds of products. This is the theory of national competitive advantage.